Just to confirm, the live stream is now recording.
Thank you, James. Welcome, colleagues. It's 2:01 today. I'm temporarily chairing this meeting in the absence of a chair. I will, for the purpose of the record and live streaming, remind everybody that we are live streaming and that obviously the public at large can see what we're saying. Okay. There are no apologies from anybody at the moment. In terms of electing a chair, I have, through the LEP, received one nomination, and that being Alexis McAvoy. Before I invite you to do that, I'd just like to confirm that I am Peter Bolf, the City Solicitor for Portsmouth City Council and the accountable body yourselves. Ordinarily, I go around the room and ask you to introduce yourselves, but I'm not entirely sure I can see all of you. So I'm assuming that Lauren's got a list of the attendees today. If you want to put your thumb up, have we got that?
I have.
Excellent. So I don't need to do that.
You don't. I would like to just note apologies from Councillor Susan Bayford,
Good.
Councillor Derek Pretty, and Councillor Pam Bryant. Now they may be able to join the meeting later. I believe their previous meeting is overrun, but as of yet they are not on the call. Thank you, Lauren. So the first thing in business is, could I have a seconder for Councillor Alexis McAvoy to be chair of the Solent Growth Forum? Anyone will do.
I'll support it.
Thank you very much. On that basis, I'd like to welcome Councillor Alexis McAvoy to chair the meeting moving forward, and she can take you through the agenda right now. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, thank you very much, Peter. Sorry, I just heard somebody speak.
No, just saying a pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. Oh, sorry. Okay, I can see how this is going to go. So the first main item on the agenda is the Solent 2050 Plan for Growth and Questions and Answers. Stuart Baker will be taking this, but just before we go on to the item, before I hand over to him, I'd just like to add that we do have several members here, several new members here today, and I would welcome and encourage you all to make notes on the presentation so that you can ask Stuart plenty of questions. And our role today is to scrutinise this plan as closely as possible. So I'll give you all an opportunity to challenge Stuart on anything you want clarified or justified. So, feel free to make your notes, ask as many questions as you want. So I can hand that over to you then, Stuart, to take us through this item.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen and appreciate a thumbs up from people that they can see it. Let's try that. Come on, system. How's that? Is that visible to people? Thank you very much. Excellent. Right. Okay. I'll run through this. So, I'm Stuart Baker. I am Business Development Director at Solent LEP. I'm also Managing Director of Maritime UK Solent as well, which I'll talk about a little bit in relation to this Solent 2050, because it's a key part of our economic strategy. In terms of Solent 2050, we published this back in June at the Solent Summit. So it was in development for several years through various different pieces of central policy. So the plan is live. It is the economic strategy for the area as well. And LEPs, whilst their roles are evolving, one of the areas that government is keen for LEPs to lead on in the absence of combined authorities is for the economic strategy of the area. So hopefully this will go on to the next slide as well. Yeah, so I thought I'd just cover a little bit on Solent 2050. Just appreciate that there are a number of new members on here who may not be familiar with the strategy, but I won't dwell on the detail of it because that would be quite a boring presentation, I suppose, but actually focus on more of some of the areas that we're actually delivering on in relation to the strategic priorities that we set out in 2050. So as I say, brief overview of Solent 2050, and then a bit of a focus on maritime business support and decarbonisation as well. We're doing lots more, and certainly Darren, who's going to be picking up the next agenda item, will be talking about some of the work we're doing in relation to skills and careers as well. So I've deliberately not gone on that here. So in terms of Solent 2050, it is the economic strategy for our area. In terms of developing it, we spoke to, crikey, well over 600 different individuals and organisations for a whole range of workshops and sessions. Obviously, through the period of development, we had COVID, which actually influenced where we got to and where we ended up with the strategy, because obviously that had a fundamental change on the way the economy operates and the way communities live their lives as well. So we absolutely had to take that on board. I think through that era as well, we also saw an increasing focus on climate change and the impacts of and decarbonisation, which again influenced where we ended up with the policy as well. And of course, you know, times are dynamic and things are evolving still with cost of living and energies and energy crisis and you know, but you have to draw a line in the sand somewhere. But I think where we got to with the strategy is something that has certainly had strong resonance with a whole range of central government policies that came out through that period, which is quite good really, because it was developed by the area through, as I say, significant engagement as well. So sorry, I'll just go back there. So, you know, I never like reading out slides, but I think with a vision, it's probably worth it. So the vision that the area alighted on was to be the globally leading maritime cluster and at the forefront of innovations to adapt to climate change, with towns and cities that are fantastic places to live, trade, and with opportunities for all our communities to flourish. We are a coastal economy here in the Solent. We have 340 miles of coastline. We have islands and peninsulas. It does define us. It's within our DNA. It influences our industry as well, and it does set us apart from other areas. And so it's quite right that the area did alight on that as a particular focus. It is our strategic strength as well. When we look at maritime on an international footing, it's very clear that we have assets and expertise in this area that are unsurpassed globally, and that's the only sector where we can really say, actually, we are world leading. So in terms of strategic priorities, we've got 7 of them, and this is really the sort of areas that we focus on as a LEP, and this isn't just about the LEP delivering on these priorities. It is about the area delivering on these priorities as well. I think the days when LEPs were given tens of millions of pounds to deliver capital projects are behind us. We've had a sort of 280 odd million pound capital programme in the past, which I'm sure Kate and Lloyd will talk about later on the agenda. But those days have gone. We still have significant funds, but we have to deploy them in different ways. So the way we are as a LEP is changing as well, and it's about our sort of soft power, our influence, and how we convene people to deliver on these priorities that the area has identified. So, you know, the marine and maritime sector, which we've talked about, is very important for us. We want to maintain that world leadership in marine and maritime. Interestingly, government in the Levelling Up white paper that came out earlier in the year, February, I believe, identified a whole range of economically significant clusters in the UK. And for the Solent, it said, yep, we recognise you as an economically significant cluster, and your sectoral strength is around ports, logistics, and maritime. Also identified our 3 universities in there as well, which was good endorsement. Clearly, climate change adaptation and decarbonisation, everything we do has to be considered through that lens. We can't get away from that. So very important that we have that as a strategic priority. Number 3 is around coastal renaissance. So I suppose this is around regeneration and levelling up, whichever term you wish to use. I think one of the features of the Solent and you know is that it is lagging behind other areas in terms of productivity. We lag behind the southeast by productivity of about 9% and behind the UK average in terms of productivity by about 1%. We shouldn't, but we do. It has significant socioeconomic challenges, particularly in some of our cities, and then also in some of our rural areas, including the Isle of Wight as well, that need to be addressed. But I think all too often the area is overlooked in terms of investment, because we're seen as an affluent area on the south coast, but we're not. We have significant challenges, and I think we, certainly the urban areas would be more akin to northern conurbations as well. In terms of number 4, one of our key sectors in this area is the visitor, creative and cultural economy. The tourism sector has been clearly hard hit through COVID, and we've got a sort of growing creative and cultural economy, and very much on the sort of back of the Southampton 2025 City of Culture bid as well. Whilst ultimately the bid was unsuccessful, I think the work that was done as part of that has really lifted the area, not just Southampton, but the area more broadly, and shone a spotlight on our culture in this area, and some of the key assets we have and the potential we have to actually grow those sectors as well. We've been doing a bit of work in terms of our business support arm, the Growth Hub, to deliver on that, and we've been asked to lead on digital skills partnerships for the South East as well, and got some more ideas how we can support the growth of that sector. Talent base, skills, this is always important. If whenever I speak to businesses, top of their list in terms of challenges is recruitment. Just cannot get the skills that they need. If we think about Solent Freeport, for example, we'll see 16,000 new jobs in the area. We want local people to be going into those jobs. We don't want to be importing labour from outside, from elsewhere in the country. We've got to give an opportunity to our young people to have a good career in a well-paid job. So again, you'll hear from Darren later on the work that him and his team are doing to promote careers, education in our schools and colleges in the area as well. And we're working really closely with the Hampshire Chamber of Commerce on the development of the local skills improvement plan that they're leading on. We obviously want to create an outstanding business environment. I think this is a fantastic place to work. I've lived here for the majority of my life, born and bred in the area. It's hard to see a better area to sort of locate yourself as a business than this one. We're close to London, and yet we have the benefits of an outstanding environment as well to enjoy. But actually, it's the sort of wraparound support that we can provide to support businesses as they land in the area or want to grow, or even just survive as well. And I mentioned earlier that the impact of COVID in particular and how that changed our strategy, and certainly the 7th strategic priority there around health and well-being is one that certainly pre-COVID we didn't have this in our strategy, but I think we've seen the role of health and well-being as part of a successful economy has really come to the fore through the pandemic. We certainly experienced locally within our teams the sort of loneliness of home working for some people as well, and I think it's good that we've been able to sort of shine a spotlight on that, and the pause we had to necessarily do through COVID ahead of releasing this strategy was good to have time to reflect on how the world is changing. So that's the sort of strategy. I don't really want to say too much more about it, because that is the crux of it in terms of the vision and the strategic priorities, and they guide the work that we will do as an LEP, and that we have identified that we think that the area would be best to focus on to support economic growth, and we can see that through a range of things. And I thought I'd just talk about a range of areas that we've been involved in. Solent Freeport, under the sort of key sector of maritime for us, we recognise this policy before it even emerged as a policy. We sort of got the soundings, and we thought, right, this is a policy that really has the sort of DNA of the Solent written all over it, given our gateway status for UK PLC in terms of trading with the world, and our coastal dimension. Of course, freeports don't exclusively have to be coastally located, but all of them are bar one. So we felt this was something important. We got people together, got partners together really early on, so that when the formal invitation came to bid for freeport status, we were mobilised and ready. And fortunately, we're one of those 8 freeports in England that were identified and offered the opportunity to come forward. We're now leading the pack on that, and I was on a panel with all the freeports this morning, thinking, just discussing where they all are, and it's very clear that Solent Freeport is at the top of the pack. It's been signed off by the Treasury Approval panel, just waiting for Secretary of State sign off before we can fully operationalise. So a tremendous amount of work over 2 years by the LEP and other partners to get us to this position. Why? Well, you can see some of the metrics on the slide there. This will create 16,000 jobs in the area. Uplift GVA, gross value added, by about £1 billion, and recognising that role that the Solent has in terms of multiplier effects because of the role we perform for UK PLC as a trading gateway. There's actually about another 16,000 jobs that will be created across the wider UK, and an uplift of 1.9 billion GVA across the wider UK as well. So significant numbers there to support economic growth. And we have to remember that, you know, this is a regenerative tool. This is a tool to level up the economy, and you remember that I said earlier that the Solent is very much in need of that leveling up. Importantly, and now more so than ever with public finances tight, we're able to leverage in private sector investment for the confidence that they'll get through the tax incentives that Freeport policy brings with it, and that will bring new infrastructure to the area that otherwise wouldn't have come, and also the opportunity to retain rates as well generated by new businesses in the area, and we've calculated that to be just over £500 million over the next 25 years as well. So significant investment, and it's really important because that investment can be reinvested in the wider Solent area to support the ambitions of the Freeport. But that's where we'll see skills interventions come into play, interventions to support decarbonisation, interventions to improve the ecosystem of innovation in the area. So that's the real benefit for our area that I see. Those of you that are familiar with Freeport policy, you know, the key objectives were around establishing Freeports as hubs for international trade, promote regeneration and job creation, and create hotbeds for innovation. It's enabled us to sort of shine the spotlight, particularly on our maritime innovation as well. There's a whole range of fiscal incentives that you can see listed there that the Freeports offer, and I think, you know, certainly, I mean, I've been working at the LEP for about 9 years, and the uptick in inquiries from internationally mobile investors to invest in the area has been significant, something that I've never seen before, and I think that's because of the market intervention that the tax benefits provide. So it would suggest that the policy is working, and it's been great to have sort of that coalition of the local authorities, industry, national park, all together working and getting their shoulders behind this initiative. So in terms of our tax and customs sites, a map there just of where they are, and you can see a focus of activity along the western banks of the of Southampton Water there. That's our Southampton Water tax site. We've got a Navigator Quarter tax site just to the north there, focused around Southampton Airport, and then Dunsbury Park on the A3M just to the north of Portsmouth in Havant as well. So some key areas of development and new jobs to be created for local people as well, and our 2 custom sites, one at Solent Gateway and Portsmouth International Port as well. Just sticking with the maritime scene as well, we've been really clear that the maritime is the core sector for the Solent. Government are very clear on that as well, and we sort of recognise that we have that world-leading capability, and I've listed those areas there where we have genuine world-leading capability happening here in the Solent. And if you get around to sort of some of the businesses that are sort of leading in terms of maritime autonomy, maritime robotics, clean maritime as well, the level of expertise and world leading capability that's happening here in the Solent is quite outstanding, and it's really important that we get our young people to be far more aware of what's happening here, so that they can aspire to have jobs in those careers of tomorrow. Innovation assets in terms of maritime here in the Solent, I've listed some of the sort of key assets we have. It's an embarrassment of riches, really, and then when we sort of translate that into industry as well, just a selection of some of the key businesses that are really world leading and sort of innovating in maritime that we have here, that have chosen to locate here in the Solent. And that's not just big business as well, it's smaller micro businesses as well, doing some really, really good things. We held our first ever Maritime UK Solent Awards on Friday evening, which is a huge success. About 230 people attending, and it was great to see a whole range of businesses winning awards, as I say, not just big business but small business, and also recognizing apprentices and the great work of individual employees as well as winners too. So I talk about the maritime economy a lot, and I will stop after this slide, but it really is powerful. 7.7 billion pound GVA generated by our maritime sector here in the Solent, so that's about 25% of our economic output, so it's significant. Mersey, for example, is another strong maritime cluster in the UK. They generate about £5 billion of GVA, so we're significantly ahead of them. We can track about 200,000 jobs back to the maritime sector as well, so really, really fundamentally important to us as well. And there's some key metrics around what this is generating in terms of our key assets around the ports, in terms of crews, trade, and short sea passengers as well. So we have established a new organisation called Maritime UK Solent, which I'm managing director of. We have a strong board, and that really was because there wasn't anything that existed to promote the maritime sector, a single voice to lead, to champion and to grow that sector. And we incorporated in July last year, so we're a fairly young organisation but have come a long way, and as I say, linking back to the Levelling Up white paper, we were identified there as one of the key private sector led organisations that government will work with to support sectoral growth in their area. So come a long way in a really short period of time. Got some really important partnerships developing with the Institute of Technology, for example, that some really exciting sort of plans for the future. But yeah, just wanted to sort of say that this is a LEP initiative. The LEP has set this company up. The LEP is providing capacity funding to get this company away. Me and the team are looking at opportunities for revenue generation, so that we are truly self-financing. That's the position we want to get to, so that we can provide, so that we can do more for industry, and to make sure that the Solent maritime sector retains that world-leading role that it has currently. Business support, another key area for us, and if we think back to those strategic priorities, an outstanding business environment is something that we're really keen to, and we have our Solent Growth Hub, which does a great role there. We receive funding from the Department for Bays to support us, but I think the key thing here is we're working with those other employer representative bodies, whether it's the FSB, whether it's New Forest Business Partnership, whether it's Hampshire Chamber of Commerce, so that we work in partnership and we don't duplicate what each other's doing. We have done a bit of a focus on the creative sector very recently, and I sort of highlight there. We'll share these slides because I think there's some links involved in there as well, around how we're supporting that sector with some specific programs, and sustainability for SMEs in terms of environmental sustainability is key, and we've got a new program there to support businesses and how they can achieve net zero. Peer network is something that we're quite proud of. That's worked really well over the last couple of years, where we've been able to fund programs of activity for business, for employees within businesses to learn from each other, and we had to adapt that program for it to go virtual through COVID, but that worked really, really well, and now obviously as we're out the other side of that, although I think figures are increasing again, we're able to hold those peer network programs on a face-to-face basis. Decarbonisation, something that is really important. I think sort of runs through our economic strategy and very much through all of the work that we do. We've been working of late with ExxonMobil and University of Southampton and others to promote Solent Decarbonization Cluster. And we'll be launching that on the 1st of November. And if you haven't had an invite to that, please do let me know and I can make sure that you get one. I think the key thing I would say about this is there is a lot of good work on decarbonisation that is happening here in the Solent. Government have been quite clear that they feel that this area needs to formalise itself in terms of a decarbonisation entity. To enable it to be in a better position to bid for funding that will be released by government next year for carbon capture, usage and storage and wider decarbonisation. Other areas in the UK have already sort of done this. East Coast cluster around Humber has been quite successful, led by their LEP, and also HyNet in the northwest as well. Industry-led partnerships again. But local authority involvement is really important. I mean, if we think about bus contracts, we think about gritters, we think about bin lorries, all these kind of things are using fuels of the future. And one of the key opportunities we have here in the Solent is those alternative fuels of the future, particularly around hydrogen and electric as well, with some real innovation happening here in the future. So this is something that we've been asked as an LEP, so, you know, from industry to say, look, this is something that government want us to do. We recognise, LEP, that you have strong convening power across public and private area sectors. We recognise that you can be an honest broker as well, and particularly adept at sort of handling public funding, as we demonstrated across the years. So we've been happy to take that up because it very much sits at the heart of our economic strategy as well. So I'm pretty sure that this new cluster, the Solent cluster, will be something that we'll all be hearing a lot more of in the coming weeks and months. I was going to play a video then around Solent 50, which will give you a flavour of our strategy, but hopefully, here we go. Can you hear the sound? No, okay, all right, just bear with me. I'll see if I can just get the sound to come on. Apologies. Hopefully it's not critical. If not, team, is there an easy way I can put the sound on at all? No. If not, we can send this round and we can make sure that you hear that. It's just a video. We played it at the Solent Summit and it kind of sets our strategy within context, focusing on those 7 strategic priorities. But I'll go on to the next slide, and that is the end. I'll close down the presentation there. Apologies for the mix-up on the presentation. Not sure what happened with the video.
Are you all done?
Yeah, all done for me, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, actually, that was really quite interesting. Lots of exciting things there. Before I ask people for all their hundreds of questions that I'm expecting, there are a number of acronyms in there. Now, for my benefit, what's GVA?
Gross value added. So it's a measure of productivity of an area. So really important economic metric that we use.
Okay, and I'm waiting for somebody's hand to come up here, but if I could just ask you, you said you spoke to 600 organisations. What sort of range of organisations were they? And, you know, and how did they feel they could benefit from or for the Solent LEP?
Yeah, it's so a whole, I mean, pretty much any type of organisation, from micros, SMEs, big business, universities, research organisations, schools, colleges, local authorities. We had, it's going back quite a long time now, but we certainly did a tour of the area. So we had good geographic coverage, including the 2 cities, the Isle of Wight. I think we did one in the New Forest as well. And used every opportunity to communicate the work as we developed, but importantly to get people to shape it themselves. This has to be a strategy for the area. This isn't just the LEP strategy. We've just done the work to understand what the area wanted as its strategy. And I think where we got to, you can never please everybody, of course, but I think where we've got to with those 7 priorities in particular, it will be hard to disagree with those. People may think there should be a bit more of a focus on something, but it was an evidence-based approach as well. So, we did a lot of work to look at the economy, to look at horizon scanning in terms of sectors as well for the future. And there's certainly a sort of green flavour to the maritime element anyway in there. But yeah, every type of industry, every type of stakeholder you can imagine, we spoke to through a whole series of workshops and events.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the first hand I've got, and I hope I pronounce this correctly, Councillor Lorna Fialka. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Shall I come back to you? Okay. The next one is Joe Lever. That's better. No, you're still on mute. That's
sorry, it was delayed.
Excellent.
Coming up. Hi everyone. I'll just introduce myself quickly as well because this is my first call. So I'm Councillor Joe Lever. I'm from the Isle of Wight Council. I'm the chair of the Neighbourhoods and Regions Script Policy and Scrutiny Committee, and that's why I'm here. 2 things from me, if I can be cheeky. The first one is we've had a presentation about the Freeport before in my committee a few months, but it was earlier in the year. I'm still kind of just waiting to see what impact the Isle of Wight will get from this, because obviously 16,000 jobs, 1.6 billion GVA directly into the Solent, but seeing as the island doesn't have any of the what they call again?
Tax and custom sites.
Yeah, the tax and custom sites. I'm just kind of curious if we've got any sort of estimates on what percentage, how much of that the island will directly see, as that's my concern here.
Yeah, no, absolutely, really good question. So in terms of the tax sites, we were allowed 600 hectares in total of tax sites, which I'm sure you had from the presentation previously. We did an open call, and we had a consultancy to support us and say, look, let's look at this objectively, looking at the government policy. What's our best opportunity? Because this is a competition to actually get them away. And the minimum hectareage as well was 20 hectares per site, maximum of 200 per site if you were going to have three tax sites like we have. The opportunities from the Isle of Wight didn't fall within that. I think they're on the smaller end, which is a shame. So that's why. What I would say though is the wider Freeport area is the same geography as the Solent LEP area. So the Isle of Wight is very much part of that. And that ability to retain business rates, so that £500 million over the next 25 years, that can be invested in that area. So we're working, for example, with CCAM and Isle of Wight College, for example. So they've got a maritime specific sort of satellite at CCAM around how we can get the skills that we need for Solent Freeport. I've just been on a call this morning with we're looking at an opportunity to fund a demonstrator of an electric water taxi as well. So and I think the ambition there and part of the narrative there is around how do we connect all those coastal communities and job opportunities in those Freeport tax sites in the future. And we don't want people driving to them. We don't want, it's particularly if the Isle of Wight, it becomes very difficult to drive there. You've got to get the ferry across. But actually, if you can have a water taxi, that makes accessibility a lot easier. But even on the mainland, if you're in Southampton and you've got a job in Fawley Waterside, that's a long old trip round. But if you can get a water taxi across, you're talking 15-20 minutes. So significantly changes and improves that accessibility. So investment in those kind of projects in the wider area is something that I would expect business rates to be deployed against. The other thing that's worth mentioning, and you'll have seen it in the news, and lots in the news in the last half hour, of course, but in investment zones as well. And now these are sort of opportunity, very similar to the tax site. So pieces of land that will have a whole range of tax incentives, actually better than the Freeport tax sites as well, and that cover a period of 10 years, whereas the Freeport tax incentives are to 2026 as it stands at the moment. So we've worked with Isle of Wight Council, Southampton and Portsmouth City Council to develop expressions of interest for that. So there are some investment zones that have been put forward for the island, as I'm sure you're aware, and fingers crossed, depending wherever government policy is in relation to investment zones, then they'll translate into reality, and there'll be opportunities for the Isle of Wight to enjoy those benefits that the tax sites in the Freeport can benefit as well.
Okay, you happy with that, Joe?
Yeah, I'll just got a separate question if that's okay.
Shall we do the first questions for everybody first because of the time? Is that okay?
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you.
I can see Lorna is back with your little microphone. Are you working? No, you can't hear us. Okay, well, we'll go on to Tristan Samuels.
Excuse me, Councillor McAvoy. Lorna has put a question in the chat.
So has she?
You can come back to that in a minute.
I'll come back to that. Okay. Yes. So
thank you,
Tristan. Yeah.
Yes. It's probably I was going to ask one that, but I think Councillor Lever's sort of asked most of it. I think that thing around the halo effect of the Freeport investment, I think, was a really important message. But instead, Stuart, I'm quite interested in the decarbonisation and the ExxonMobil cluster and how local authorities can be more involved.
Yeah,
yeah.
Tristan, I'll tell you what, I'm just writing to Portsmouth City Council. So we have been in contact, and we're struggling for a response. So shall we touch base offline? So essentially, we're looking for local authorities, and most of the local authorities in the Solent have agreed to sign the charter and be founding members of this as well. The points you'll have seen in that slide I put up on the charter were things that I think everybody would subscribe to anyway. So I'll drop you an email when I finish this, and it's good to have you on board, I think.
Okay, you're happy with that, Tristan? Okay, and I'm sorry,
there's a question in the chat which I'm happy to sort of read out and answer.
Yes, I was just going to read it. That's for Lorna. Can you do that? I won't read
Yeah,
it.
happy to. So this is a question around good to see health and well-being as a priority. Can I give some examples of the work being done in this area? Yes, absolutely. So we've been working with the FSB, Federation of Small Businesses, on a specific programme to support health and well-being in the workplace as well. So you've just worked in partnership. That's been a program that has is free as well. So employees or businesses can subscribe to that program and secure advice and confidential advice in relation to health and well-being. And I think that's been quite valuable. We kind of need to reflect on the findings of it, but I think it's certainly been a decent uptake on that. So that's one specific area. I think over and above that, I think what I'd say also is I think the strategy and the work we do, and it's even translated into the Freeport as well, is the role of the environment in the area and how important that is to people's health and well-being, and how important that is as a kind of as a feature of the area and of people. Well, and of the economy. I think I said it in there as well. I think a healthy economy, the increasing recognition of the role of the environment and having access to that environment has become really important. So certainly something that influences the work we do, if that helps.
Okay, thank you for that, Stuart. And back to you, Joe.
Thank you. My other question, there's two parts to it essentially. There's the touching on the investment zones that you spoke of, Stuart, and also the Solent Cluster Partnership that you're talking about. I'm really interested to see some more detail around the greener part of this element. So obviously the Solent Cluster Partnership, there's a lot of talk about net zero in there by 2050, which is actually a bit too late, but that's okay. That's the government target at the moment. My concern is one that how people might perceive a partnership with partners such as Exxon, who don't have the best reputation on environmental matters, and obviously I've got residents from Isle of Wight that have spoke to me about greenwashing with things like that. So I'd be interested in your views on that. And the other side of that then is the investment zones, where there's a lot of reports at the moment that they would undermine or deregulate environmental protections and planning protections, which is a very hot topic on the Isle of Wight. So I'd be keen to see some detail that kind of quells my concerns in that regard as well, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So in terms of Solent decarbonisation cluster, ExxonMobil have put some initial funding to set this up, and that's in the absence of any other funding. So that's been good. They are keen to step back because they recognise exactly the things that you've said, and they recognise that this needs to be a decarbonisation cluster for the area, not for ExxonMobil. And so that's why we're keen to get local authorities and other bodies signed up to this, so that they can own this decarbonisation cluster as well. But this ExxonMobil are very clear this is not their cluster. They just see that actually they want to do some work around hydrogen, which I think we'd all agree is a good thing in terms of that transition away from fossil fuels in the future. It's part of that transition pathway. But actually, this needs to be something that is sort of owned by the area if it's to be successful, and that's why they've been keen that as an LEP we take this on, and you know, in terms of the governance of this and what it may look like, we haven't sort of arrived at that yet, but we will do some work on that. We've done a bit of thinking on it, and there will be, I suspect, a board that will sort of be the decision-making board, but it will be good governance, and there will be very clear and accountable decision-making in relation to the use of any public funding and the direction of the charter, as you'd expect, just as we've done with the Freeport, just as we've done with the LEP, etc. But yeah, it's very much not we're just taking ExxonMobil's money because they're willing to fund it in the first instance, and which has been really helpful. So there's a website that's been created, branding, stakeholder mapping, the launch event on the first, the Harbour Hotel and Ocean Village as well. All that costs a lot. And they're funding it, and also, you know, they have that soft power of bringing in other big business as well to sign this charter, probably more so than certainly in some of those sort of multinational corps that we wouldn't have had traction with, and we can bring the local players in, which is great, but it's good to get that wider sign up, and I think the focus on this area from government is because there is, you know, there's a map that shows the key sort of carbon emitting areas in the UK, and Southampton Water is one of those, as you'd expect, and it's about addressing that for the future. So this I think is a good thing for the future, but yeah, it's very much a decarbonisation cluster for the area, and not just the Solent actually, because the network of pipes that runs from this area that hydrogen could be transported on, you know, isn't just about the Solent. We think about Jet Zero to Heathrow, Gatwick, etc. As well. So real opportunities for the future, and it's, you know, again, new good green jobs in the area as well, potentially on the back of this.
Okay, Joe.
There was another part. There was another part to the question as well, wasn't there? Sorry, I've forgotten what that was.
It was just concerns about the investment zones, obviously.
Oh yeah.
I'm not against investment. Obviously, that would be wild. But the counterpoint to that about the investment zones is there is concern that it essentially undermines environmental and planning protections that we have, and that's a really big sticking point on the Isle of Wight at the moment. So
yeah, I think it's a big sticking point everywhere, to be honest. And I think the fact that it was ill-defined in the sort of policy documentation that came out left people concerned about what they really would be signing up to, because they just didn't know. I think everybody wanted the fiscal benefits that came with it and the extension to 10 years, or the provision of 10 years, but there was real anxiety around those planning elements of it because they were ill-defined. So in terms of the Solent Freeport, I think there's a sort of published letter on the website anyway in terms of converting the tax sites to investment zones that is very, very, very clear that it wants the fiscal incentives but doesn't want any party of the planning elements to it as well. In terms of the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth and Southampton bids, it's probably ones for them, but our involvement in those has been to help. I know Tristan's on here, who obviously have a good line of sight on the Portsmouth one, but yes, we're very clear, certainly with regard to the Isle of Wight, that Bob Seeley, for example, was very clear his views on the planning aspect. So they've been submitted with the with the consent of the local authority, of course, because they're the ones who submit them. But within the lens of anxieties and clarity on what any planning elements of that would be. But I think everybody wants the financial bits, but probably less so the planning elements.
Okay, all right, Joe. Well, thanks very much. Quite interesting. Lots of things drawn out from there. I'm sure we could probably go on for a bit longer, but we better now move on to the update on CEC delivery, followed again by questions and answers. Now, Darren Coventry is going to speak to us about this, but just for my benefit, can you tell me what CEC stands for and explain what it does?
Absolutely, I can indeed. Afternoon, everyone. So CEC is the Careers and Enterprise Company. And the best way of describing them is like a mini Quango of the Department for Education, where funding stems from out of government to fund the careers piece throughout careers hubs in England. Okay, so they are ultimately driving the careers agenda, should we say, on behalf of the government. So the update we're giving you, or so I'm giving you, is around the Solent LEP holds one of these contracts for the Solent region. I'm going to give you an update on a little bit more about the Careers Hub, what a Careers Hub is, and around touching a little bit on performance, but then some of the other things that we do as a Careers Hub as well to make members here aware of the functionality that we have. Would you like me to jump straight into it?
Yes, you might as well. You're the one with the information.
Okay, right. I'm just going to put a presentation up. Okay, can everyone see the presentation?
Yeah, good for me.
Excellent.
Yes, good for me.
Excellent. Yeah. Right. Okay, so first things first, what is a Careers Hub? Okay, so I'm literally going to take you through the journey of a Careers Hub and what drives our our process and procedure and the relationships that we have. So Careers Hub as such, we drive progress against what's called the Gatsby Benchmarks. So the Gatsby Benchmarks, there are 8 of them, and they are a set of criteria that have been drawn up some 5-6 years ago that good careers advice and guidance work towards to make sure that our young people have adequate careers advice and guidance. This enables schools and colleges and their careers leaders to access training and support and to collaborate in a focused way, so bringing together the best practice and local labour market insights. So the way to look at it is that as an organisation, the Solent LEP, we have this collaboration with all of our schools. We also have a lot of collaboration with our industry and employers, and a lot of the work that we do is bringing the two together. So a hub will offer schools and colleges dedicated support from a local hub team and facilitate partnerships with employers. The goal is also to make it easier for schools and colleges to improve how they prepare young people for their next steps. And that's one of the key areas around careers. When you immediately think about careers, you're looking about raising awareness of what the opportunities are, but then also being ready for the workplace. So currently there are 45 careers hubs within England. So this is an overview of our team. So myself as the strategic hub lead, we have an operational hub lead, and then we have a member of the team who is who works with each of the areas that you have below there. What I will say is that the Solent LEP in 2022 has increased the number of the team by 3 to meet the requirements and the demands of our schools and increase that collaboration. And so as such, so what that means is that you'll hear more and more about what we do as a careers hub and the groups that we're pulling together. And then in November, we are looking to go out to recruit a member of the team who are dedicated to work with employers and bring employers into the world of careers. Our key objectives. So we're building networks. That's the biggest objective that we have is linking schools and colleges to employers and other external careers providers through Enterprise Advisor Network and Careers Hub. Now you'll hear me talk a little bit about Enterprise Advisors here. An Enterprise Advisor is generally someone from industry, or we're finding in increasing numbers are retired individuals who will be who will step forward to work with a school or a college, and they will support that school on designing careers, advice and guidance and policy within that school, working with the senior leadership team, and then also working with the young people there around preparing for the workplace. Support, we naturally support the careers leaders within our schools, provide them with training and support and help and advice on how they can have effective programs. Gatsby, as I've talked about, is the framework and the implementation of this best practice. And then promote, we raise awareness. So, our mantra at the moment is creating curiosity in careers. But then we're also then looking at transition and succession planning. So when we talk about transition, we're looking at our years 11 moving on to their next steps, be that in HE, FE, doing an apprenticeship, doing one of the new T levels. But then we're also then looking at succession planning, because we're not just looking at the labour market shortages how they are now. We're looking at, for instance, Stuart's talked about with the Freeport. So there's the Enterprise Quarter in Southampton Airport. The nearest college to that is Eastleigh, and Eastleigh are doing, added qualifications around logistics, and it's how we then help collaborate that and get that out to our local schools. So the governance and stakeholders that work behind us as a careers hub, there are 3 groups. Okay, they're represented by panels. So we have a steering group, what we call it's called the steering group, and it's made up of education and local authorities. So all of our local authorities are represented in there through their education designated education leads there. We also have colleges there. We have enterprise advisors there, and we also have university through the university, the Uni Connect there, who and what they talk about there is that issues around the Gatsby benchmarks, and then how we can use some of our funding to support them, but then also promoting the partnership predominantly around how we can look at where employers can get involved. That group meets every 2 months. And we started the group in May. We're on our 3rd meeting. The 3rd meeting happened this week. We also then have a Cornerstones employer, which is completely new. Actually, the first meeting of Cornerstones employers I was at before this meeting. So we have 14 employers who make up that group, who've gone through a recruitment process and stepped forward to look at how they as employers, but then also their industry can work with schools. Common questions in there around promoting apprenticeships, around preparation for workplace. And the employers, some of the employers that we have in there, we have BAE, we have Airbus, we have DSTL, we have B&Q, Southern Co-op, Southwestern Rail. They're there. We are looking for more SMEs to join. We've got 2 SMEs in there at the moment, but we'd like to have more of a representation from the SME sector there. And then ultimately what comes out of those 2 groups then feeds in part to the Solent Skills Advisory Panel, which is as such the executive. So plans going forward will be that the chair on the Cornerstones Employer Group will then also form membership of the Skills Advisory Panel, because then we're then starting to look at things from a strategic point of view and meeting the needs of the region. So the support structures we have enterprise coordinators. So as you saw on the organisation chart, the blue part, I showed you each of the areas. Well, each of those areas is supported by what we call an enterprise coordinator. And so their role there is to help the schools and colleges to improve their careers and enterprise activities. They're also there to make it easier for employers and the self-employed to engage with the schools and colleges. They focus everyone's efforts on programs and activities that are most effective and motivating our young people. And that is key, because we know ourselves that, there's a large percentage of our young people that when they are getting to year 11 still don't know what they want to do, what their next steps are. And that's where we can come in and help support that. And then there are the Gatsby benchmarks. And I'll talk through one of the Gatsby benchmarks a little bit later on, just to give you a taster of what's underneath it. We then have our enterprise advisors, as I talked about earlier on. These will support careers leaders, provide an employer's perspective, which is key. We hear a lot now where employers aren't filling their apprenticeship vacancies because the right candidates aren't coming along. That young people don't understand fully what a covering letter is, or the significance of it, or how an interview is an interview and not an interrogation. And that's also where we can start getting these young people ready for that. And we are talking predominantly from years 7 onwards. There is an argument out there about starting the careers piece in primary, and there are some support sectors out there like STEM support networks that do work with primary education, but at the moment this functionality is for year 7 upwards. So, and then the enterprise advisors help focus activities that are most effective in motivating our young people, again making that keeping that motivation going. So just to give you an overview of the Solent network, there are 100 establishments. Now, when we say 100 establishments, that's schools, colleges, SEND is special education needs schools, and PRU is pupil referral units, where we have young people who are excluded from mainstream education who have that additional support. So out of that 100, as I talk to you today, 92 of them are engaged with the Solent LEP. Now, when we say engaged, is that they are calling upon us to help support with the benchmarks, with how we can get employers to support them, the types of careers events they want to run, and other activities. But we do have a shortfall in enterprise advisors. We have 54. Part of that is that because we've had a review recently of the collaboration between our apprentice advisors and the schools, and we have removed some individuals because the relationship wasn't working the way that we needed it to be. It wasn't a collaborative relationship. It was more of a leaning on going to an individual and asking for help every now and then. To put things into context, the requirement of an enterprise advisor is that they put forward at least 6 to 8 hours a month working with that school, which is a big ask. It's a big undertaking, and some of our larger employers, as part of their social values piece, will free time up to do that. It's a bit more difficult for SMEs, and we find an increasing number of our enterprise advisors are retired individuals. Now, some of the challenges that we do come up against, and this is where highlighting, that there's a desire to do this, but it's not always landing. And part of that is that at the moment, as things stand, only 28% of our schools in the Solent area, and there are 65 of them out of that 100 establishments, have a full-time dedicated careers leader. So where we're talking about there is that we're talking about an individual who the only hat that they wear is to do with careers. And we are talking just over a quarter of them. The majority have either an individual who, commonly is a teacher, and what that then means is that if another teacher goes off sick, then that person then is called away to work in a lesson, or support staff, librarians, etc., but they are wearing multiple hats. So at times it's a struggle to put the energies into this that are required to make it successful. Only 40% then of those careers leaders have undertaken any funded CPD. Now, as part of the Careers and Enterprise Company, each establishment within the Solent network nationally is allowed up to £1,000 worth of training that's funded by the Careers and Enterprise Company to help land the Gatsby Benchmarks, to help them formulate careers plans and working with local industry. But only 40% of our careers leaders have undertaken that. And part of that is down to time. The other big concern there is only 1 in 3 of our establishments have a senior leader or governor with oversight of careers. And we are finding that actually the number of linked governors for careers is actually going in the wrong direction. We're finding that, recently that 2 of our colleges have removed those and combined the careers piece with other support areas within the college for them to have oversight on, which then dilutes, should we say, slightly the effectiveness, and then bringing to the forefront around the careers piece and ultimately what their establishment is doing for careers. So these are the Gatsby benchmarks that we talk about. As I said, there are 8 of them, and they're very broad. 5 of them generally call on schools, 3 of them are predominantly around employers, and that's again why we need to have effective collaboration there. So you've got a stable careers program, learning from career and labour market information, addressing the needs of each pupil, and I'll just skip through a few of these. Experience of workplaces, encounters with further and higher education, and personal guidance. There are 8 of them there. The average achievement for Solent establishments is 4.5, okay, which is actually slightly under the national average. And the national average is only just over 5, it's 5.1. So you can see that, the careers piece has gathered momentum, you know, in the last 4 or 5 years. It's not a case whereby that with the Careers Enterprise Company intervention and the funding that they've got is that this has been going on for a long time. It hasn't. It's pretty much started in the guise it's in now in the last 4-5 years. However, we do in this zone have a bit of work to do around getting these Gatsby benchmarks up. What I would say, and this to put people's minds at rest, is if we're asked the question that because we're only achieving 4, does that then mean that the careers advice and guidance is poor in the Solent? I'm not saying that. What I'm turning around and saying is that there are parts of each of these benchmarks that we are failing to do that we need to achieve. But the anecdotal information we're getting at the moment is that there is careers happening. It's just not happening as well as we'd like it to be. So the first one on there, the Gatsby Benchmark 1, okay? A lot of this is around publishing and having a process of careers. So where I talked about that there are parts to each one of these Gatsby benchmarks. So these are the main areas under Gatsby Benchmark 1, which a school, college or establishment is being asked, are they adequately achieving this? So every school and college should have an embedded program of careers education and guidance. Every school should have a stable, structured careers program that has explicit backing of senior management team. The careers program should be published on the school's website so students, parents, teachers and employers can access and understand it. The program should be regularly evaluated with feedback from students, parents, teachers and employers. What these are basically, these are yes and no questions of an establishment. So the requirement is that for each establishment to go on to a Careers and Enterprise Company portal, to go through each one of these Gatsby benchmarks and answer yes or no if they are achieving that. And at the moment, only 38% of establishments in the Solent area are achieving this one Gatsby benchmark. And the main one there that we are failing on is the actual part, is the third point on there around it's published on school's website so that students, parents, teachers and employers can access and understand it. So the main point there is understand that. And our schools and colleges are quite firm on themselves with this one, because the only way that you're going to understand, you'll be able to find out if a parent, especially amongst those, and employers are understanding that, as if you survey them and ask them if they fully understand that. They could turn around and say yes, through the click rates that are going through their website, they believe it's happening. So we then as an area are looking at how we can bring around surveying activity to address that. But it's still just over a third of our establishments are actually achieving this one benchmark. This gives you an overview of the benchmarks by the areas. So this is broken down mainly by our own LEP reporting side. So on the left-hand side there, you have the average number of benchmarks achieved. That says a fourth quarter. It's actually for the fourth quarter of the academic year. So it's actually the full year of 21-22 that's just ended in July. So you'll then see the breakdown between colleges through Hampshire, through the Isle of Wight, Portsmouth, PRU, Centre, Southampton. And then we then come down below, which is the breakdown between our own teams with regard to the local authorities and how they're broken down further. But the challenges, so the main challenge that we have there, okay, of engagement is around the careers leaders' time, the availability, dedicated careers resource. There is a desire to do it, but if there's time's not there to do it, it will impact on these benchmarks. Meetings being rushed and not a priority. So that means is that there is a requirement for a Solent LEP resource to meet with their colleagues within the schools and colleges every 4 to 6 weeks. We find that planning those meetings is at times difficult because of, you know, COVID is still lurking about. It still does impact on resource in schools. That the meetings are often sometimes rushed and they're not placed a priority. Senior leadership and governance. Sorry, I don't know how the number 5's got in there, but senior leadership and governance is also one of those challenges. One of the ways that we're looking to address that is that we've formulated a progress report for all of our schools and colleges that from January onwards will be sent to all the senior leaders. So if there is a disparity between what a senior leader's perception is of their careers advice and guidance and what the careers leader within that organisation is actually understanding, we can address that with this report because it will give them an overview of their performance against each one of the benchmarks and then how they're performing regionally as well. So the comments from our careers leads that we do have there. So work experience, employer engagement and mentoring is difficult. One of the things with work experience here is understanding when you can actually go to an employer who has a resource and when they're have that readily available. There's no digital resource out there for a moment, so a lot of it is literally testing the water, contacting employers and saying, look, my child, which we're finding more and more parents are doing this themselves, my child has got this, can they come and do some work experience with you? And that's one of the areas that we as a Solent LEP are looking at, and I'll come on to that a little bit later on. Uncertainty around the enterprise advisor role and how they can support a school. Compass Plus is where it's an add-on. So where I talked about the Gatsby Benchmarks, Compass Plus is the name of a software package where our schools and colleges will upload this information, but the Compass Plus takes it to the next step where they start then talking about and capturing information at student level around the careers and advice and guidance that each student has had. That then by its very nature is where on the left you're talking about things from an establishment level, and then asking it to them to a student level has an additional strain on resource. And the other one there is how to embed careers in curriculum. How can you successfully embed careers in curriculum? The box below there are establishments that aren't achieving 3 Gatsby benchmarks, which is a target from the Careers Enterprise Company that there should be 100% of your schools and colleges should be getting over 3. As you can see there, the ones in brackets are SEND provisions, so special education schools. And we are engaging with those, but there are issues around the information that's being asked of SEND schools that we need to work through with the Careers and Enterprise Company. So the priorities for us as a hub within 22-23. So employer enrichments within careers, okay, and how employers can do that. And the Cornerstones group will look to do that, and we've started ball rolling on that. There are then you're starting to look at the other concerns around education and answering some of the deeper education questions around. There is what's known nationally is that there is a concern around the level of years 7 through to 9 young ladies who fall out of STEM. And that is then further compounded in areas of free school meals, or commonly referred to as social deprivation. And it's looking at how you can support that to stem that and help, and stop that from happening. And that's also the case within construction. But then we also then have inclusion in the creative arts. So there's concern about the BAME community in creative arts, that the uptake within the BAME community is very low, and starting to understand why. Parents and influencers understanding and opportunities for their young people. Ultimately, what we want to look to do as a team is that our parents and influencers, we're talking about influencers, we're talking about parents, about guardians, grandparents, aunties, uncles, anyone who's part of that family or friend circle can impart on their young people's something about what their next steps are, something positive about what those next steps are, and just open their eyes to it, which is difficult to do over a careers fair. So, and then looking at how there is a group focus around that individual, that young person, so that it can be discussed further. SEND and neurodiversity support. The SEND support's being driven that there has been a national review of SEND support and curriculum. And we're fortunate enough that for the South East, one of the leads on that is in Portsmouth City Council, who's also our colleague who works with us on the steering group. So they are running CPD with each member of our team on how we can better support SEND community, how we can then place for them an enterprise advisor, because some of our SEND schools will ask for an enterprise advisor from a certain sector. It might be that a lot of their young people because they're assisted living organizations will work in retail. So how they can then get an enterprise advisor from retail. It might be that some of them have high levels of autism, how the digital community can help support with that. Work experience enterprise advisors, we need increased collaboration on that. But then again, as we've got there, the leadership engagement in careers. So less than 20% of our schools and colleges in this Solent have a senior leader accountable for careers, and less than 15% have a linked governor with the same accountability. So that's something that we are raising awareness around and looking to bring forward that challenge. So some of the activities, just to give you an overview, some of the activities that we are doing. We have careers leaders in the EA events. We've got 8 of those booked for this year. And what we do, they have a theme. So the next one we're doing is in November, where we have 8 different employers from different sectors, from the National Parks Authority through to STEM Network, the Maritime, who will come in and talk to careers leaders about the opportunities within their sectors and how they can then open the door for those sectors to come and collaborate with those schools. We have apprenticeship and technical education, the funding we've put in place with all of our local authorities for those young people who are electively home educated. So this will enable that each one of those young people who wants to engage and take that advice, they will have one-to-one careers advice and guidance around apprenticeships and T-levels, and the opportunities open to them for that, because they are a group who don't necessarily always fall into normal mainstream careers and advice and guidance. NEET support, so NEET, not in education, employment or training, support and intervention collaboration with our local authorities. So again, we're finding a growing number of our year 9 and 10 young people are coming under scope for possible NEET when they leave because of mental health issues. So what we're doing is that, as well as one-to-one careers advice and guidance for them, interaction with employment, we're also then looking at if there is some mental health support that we can put in place as well. We then also have the Solent LEP has recently taken on the baton of the Digital Skills Partnership for the South, and as part of that we have funding set aside to raise awareness around the digital access ways for years 7 through to 9 into the digital sectors, and there will be immersive days, access to industry days that we'll be setting up. Another big program that we're doing is that on the Isle of Wight, we are doing it with what we're calling a little bit of an incubator, where we understand that the majority of our young people now will get their information from a screen, be that on their phone, be that on a laptop, be that on a computer. So this then comes back to is that if a young person wants to find out about apprenticeships, there's a website for it. They want to find out where the vacancies are for apprenticeships, the website for it, but there isn't anything out there for work experience. So we are using the island, we're working with an IT company over there to build a portal that will be organisations raising awareness around that they can offer work experience. They cannot tick all the boxes because there are health and safety implications around that need to be done, that the school will still need to take on. But it's more a case of having a central point around work experience, around access to industry, around mentoring that those schools can take on. Looking at the success on that, and then looking at the additional funding is that we will then, if that's successful, move that around to the rest of the Solent region. We have new steering group and cornerstones groups. In the past, we didn't have them individually. They were as an executive as one. We split them out, and then we feed into both of them about the common things that are there. Support with understanding transition for students and parents. You know, the parent piece is very big for us. You know, to give you an idea, we've said to our employers what we'd like you to do is historically at the moment, parents are advised around careers, either a careers evening or a job fair. What we'd like you to do as employers is to share information around transition, around industry through either your staff intranets or through your email or through your HR departments. That may not necessarily land with a parent, but it may land then with a guardian, a family member. That if that conversation has taken place in the home, that someone can turn around and say, well, I know what you're talking about. I got this through from work. And again, just sharing that information, just those quick wins. And again, how we're looking at making parents and career skills advisors in 2023. So the Solent employer support, we're calling on the corporate social responsibilities, the emerging talents. They're looking at emerging talent, schools outreach programs. Stuart talked about MUKS recently, and they have a very good outreach program that's run via Lorna Wagner in the maritime side. And there are other sectors that have that as well, and how we can call on those outreach programs. And then succession planning as well. So future-proofing industry. And what we're looking at there is that one of the main things is where we have the Freeport, the opportunities around Freeport, where we have growing numbers of industries coming in to our area, and how that they can work there, how someone who may not necessarily have done well in their GCSEs can still go on to do a level 4 or level 5 equivalent qualification. And they're sort of like the things that we're looking at highlighting as well. So the need for employer engagement. So this is where employers come key to this and the work that we're doing. So, and this is just 4 excerpts that I've called on here. So we have a survey that was run by PricewaterhouseCoopers, who spoke to 150 of the largest employers in the UK.
Darren,
yes.
would you mind if I interrupted for a second? I'm
absolutely. Let me stop sharing.
I'm conscious of the time, and I'm sure we could probably spend another hour on this too. Do you think you could probably move it on a little more quickly? It's really interesting, but we have time limits, I'm afraid.
Of course I can. Bear with me a second. I will share again.
While you're actually finding another space, perhaps I can pick up a question from Lorna in the chat box, because it must have been, this is from Lorna Falca, if I've pronounced that correctly, Falca. She was just asking if the performance slide, it's not clear what the numbers mean. What would a good benchmarking number be?
So the minimum requirement on that one, so if I come back to that slide, is 5. So what the Careers and Enterprise Company look for here is, one moment please, so if go back to that one. So if you look at here, the minimum expectation is 5. So the Careers and Enterprise Company turn around and saying that, you know, your schools and colleges should have 5. So if you look at each one of those areas there, we're not actually achieving that at the moment.
Okay, is that all right, Lorna?
Okay.
I'm hoping there's an invisible thumbs up there. So if you can quickly move on then, please.
Of course,
Darren.
I will. Of course, I will. So some of the collaborations that we're doing with employers at the moment, we talked about the young ladies in STEM industries at the moment. So we spoke to an employer in November. You know, they've opened their firm to us, that they have 4 key managers there. 3 of them are young ladies. So we are sending in, it's 52 young ladies from Southampton who are going to this organisation to speak to the robotics team, the front office, back office functionality around opportunities. They're the sorts of things that we can do. Mentoring, you know, we have increasing number of mentoring that's taking place. We're talking about mentoring is where resources put forward to work on careers, on writing CVs, on writing covering letters. Same with the soft skills there around, you know, getting young people ready for those interviews. And then competition and challenge, there are more and more competitions being set up by industries to engage schools and get them an understanding. We've recently had one in October, which was the construction and civil engineering. It was a 2-day event, and 24 of our schools attended that and went through that. And what it was, just to give you a taste for that, the scenario was that Southampton Hospital had found sinkholes around it, so that they needed to set up a Nightingale Hospital. What then happened is that the young people went through several rooms speaking to prime contractors on what would be a large-scale building site, on how they would build a Nightingale Hospital, and then they presented their plan at the end of that. I'll skip through the asking the experience of workplaces because we can share those slides. And these are just some of the bigger education questions that we look at answering and that we're working on now. So does intensive engagement career development activities improve year 9 and 10 students? Do computer science related careers activities for females year 7 to 8 students increase positive attitudes? Does facilitated participation in teacher-employer partnership working and facilitated access to online resources results increased confidence? Where that comes from there is that we're applying for a pot of money now, working with employers, where we will place our teachers and our careers leaders in industry to get a better understanding of how they can take from industry and embed that. So if you have someone who's doing a maths or physics lesson on how they can work with a science organisation, pick up what they do in their day-to-day and then relate that within a lesson. And that's questions. Sorry, I ran over a little bit there.
Well, I don't actually have anybody with their hands up, but I would like to just ask one thing. And it's linking your presentation to the previous presentation, where one of the strategic priorities was planning to identify and help our talent base. And to drive an innovative knowledge-based economy. Are you sort of working together? I mean, we're not sort of, you know, duplicating the work here, are we?
We are. I mean, there's.
What, you are duplicating it, or you are?
No. We're not duplicating it at all. We are working together. So what happens is that, so from the maritime side, I talked about their outreach team there, has come to us. And is working with us on 2 initiatives at the moment. One is a competition, which is being worked directly with Lego League. And another one then is, how do they access our schools, and we open the doors for those schools and colleges to come in and talk about those opportunities, either that be that through a lesson, because we know that everything can be done online now, either through a day talking to all the years, but then also then looking at how we then extend that, because at the moment generally a lot of this careers piece doesn't start until years 10 and 11. Okay, and we're looking at how we then start doing that with the years 7 to 9s.
Okay. All right, well, thanks very much. We are running a bit behind. I can't see any more hands, so I'm sure that anybody can write in with a question if they want, and you'll be able to reply. Will that be okay?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's lots to take in there. You needed a little event all of your own. So we move on now to item 4. James Fitzgerald is going to review the budget position, and I understand that James is valiantly going to present this from his holiday in the Seychelles, or is it just Weymouth? I'm not quite sure.
I don't think that's going to happen, unfortunately. But we do have a better thing, which is having Lloyd Clark here instead.
Oh right, all right. I can say, oh yes, oh, that looks amazing.
Is it okay if I share some slides, Councillor?
Okay.
Okay, bear with me. Let me get to the point where this is all working. Lorna, can you let me know when things are sharing appropriately? Sorry, Lauren, I meant too many L's in the room. Can everyone see the slides okay? Excellent.
Yeah, we can now, yep.
Thank you. Right, so you've had a lot of slides. Lloyd and I will try and get through this pretty quickly because time is marching on. So we'll probably skirt over a lot of stuff. We can absolutely come back to it in another meeting. That's no problem at all. So I'm Kate Cloud. I'm the Acting Head of Corporate Services and Performance at Solent LEP. And with me is Lloyd. Lloyd, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Lloyd Clark. I work in finance for Portsmouth City Council, and we're the accountable body for the Solent LEP.
So, like I said, Lloyd's valiantly come into the breach where James has left him. But Lloyd does, to be honest, he does the work. So he will know everything there is to know about this, I'm sure. We'll cover a few bits and bobs today, a bit about finance reporting that Lloyd will take us through, but also about our monitoring processes, the way we manage risks. But what we really want to focus on is some case studies. We've picked 3 projects which we think you might be interested in, just to demonstrate how we go about monitoring projects and checking the finances are all up together. Lloyd, over to you.
So I'm conscious of the amount of time we have left, so I'm going to take the finance report as read, and then I'll talk through a couple of the main points during the presentation. So in terms of financial reporting, the Solent LEP Board and the Funding, Finance and Performance Management Group receive a financial update at each of their meetings. These reports will highlight the main financial risks to the budget and any issues that the board need to address. The case studies later on, they're going to highlight some of the issues that the board have to have experienced and have to deal with. The appendices on the slide, they represent all the detailed financial information. I'll make reference to them in future slides, but I won't go into any detail on these, mainly because of the time, and I think you've already had a presentation on the methodology of the financial reporting. So next slide, please, Kate. So just a quick financial overview. In Appendix A, you'll see a current year budget of 22.4 million. This was approved at the last Solent board meeting in October. The budget reflects the latest progress of the 2 main capital delivery programs. This is the local growth deal and the Getting Building Fund. It also forecasts the key areas of LEP delivery, such as business support, skills, which Darren mentioned in his previous presentation, and the recently launched loan funds. You also have Appendix B, which provides indicative budgets for 23-24 and 24-25, and these have been established to maintain the good practice of a 3-year rolling budget, and that gives some financial stability to the LEP. Stuart did mention it earlier, but there's a lack of certainty over government funding in future years, but we have managed to establish a core operational budget, and both loan and SME activity will be continuing across these years. We're approaching the end of our two main capital delivery programs, as mentioned before, and they're going to be managed across the current year and the 23-24 year. Appendices C and D will give you an overall position on these funds and a bit of background on them as well. And so the total grant funding for these two funds was around 200 million over the lifetime cycle of the programs. And due to the complex nature of the projects and the delays the pandemic inevitably caused, we've had to reprofile the grant expenditure, and we have a small tail of funding of around 10 million left to defray. We are dealing with large, complex capital projects, so there is a high level of risk management. Project progress is reported by exception to each meeting for FFPMG and the board, and members are asked to consider a range of recommendations and be aware of emerging risks. I think Kate's going to take you through now the risk management process over the next few slides.
I certainly am. Yeah, thanks, Lloyd. So on this slide, the grey bar there with the big titles on, that's just demonstrating the risk matrix that we use and we report back to FFPMG, which stands for Funding, Finance, Performance Management Group, which is a subgroup of the board. So we report this back to FFPMG and board at every meeting. And we also review this on a fortnightly basis within the LEP executive as well. So we always have a very live and up-to-date picture of the risks of any one of our funded projects. You can see in the middle there that we particularly pick out delivery, finances and reputation, and we score each project against those titles. The score ranges from 1 to 15, I think it is, and the higher the score, the higher the risk, and that is added together to create a score which you'll see on the right hand side, where we've got those amber boxes that I've just used as a demonstration. What we're also very keen to do is show to FFPMG and board the trend of those risks. So you'll see we've got down arrows or up arrows or staying the same arrows, just so that we can monitor things over time and they can ask questions as appropriate based on that risk changing. I'll scoot through this. There's a lot of writing here. And as Lloyd said, you may well have heard a lot of this before, but we do take that consistent and proportionate approach wherever we can with our projects. And we rely heavily on the funding agreements, our contracts, which state what the beneficiaries of the funding are going to deliver for that funding. So that's not just necessarily how much bricks and mortar they're going to use. That's about the output that they're going to create from the projects. That'll be demonstrated more in the case studies we'll come to in a moment. So we have a process of monitoring projects on a quarterly basis for those that are live and building whatever they're going to build. And once they've done that and we're happy that they're cracking on and delivering those outputs that they're contracted to deliver, we reduce that to biannual monitoring, 6-monthly monitoring. That is aggregated up and sent up to government. We have to do that on a biannual basis now. It used to be quarterly, but now it's biannual basis for both the local growth deal and getting building funds. Before it gets to then, those aggregated reports go through our board and through the LEP chief exec and the Portsmouth City Council Section 151 officer as our accountable body as well. So we make sure that there are lots of gatekeepers. We make sure that the information we send up to government is well checked, thoroughly checked. So this is just a demonstration for the local growth deal only of what the risk scores look like and the sort of thing that gets presented to FFPMG and board. It comes with more detail than we'll show here and we've redacted that down because this is a public meeting and a lot of it is commercially sensitive information. But just to give you an example, your eye will immediately be drawn, I'm sure, to the red and the amber red boxes. Since these scores were put up there, we're expecting a much lower score for those projects in the Q2 return, which we're dealing with currently as it happens. You'll also see there are a couple of projects on the right hand side there where we know that delivery is extended into 2024-25 financial year, and that's for known reasons, as Lloyd mentioned, partly to do with the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the effect on material delivery and things like that. And our board have made decisions that yes, that's okay to push that out to those dates. And then the other bits I've picked out towards the bottom of that screen is that we've got sort of final claims coming in for 4 of those projects in this financial year. That's what we're expecting. So they will be into that biannual monitoring report from the next financial year rather than quarterly. Similarly, but different, for the Getting Building Fund, where we have fewer projects, we also look at the risk rating, and that middle column, RAG rating column, is the one which I draw your attention to. Again, with the example we've given here, the higher number is what will immediately catch your eye, and we know with that one that we're expecting that to reduce dramatically for the Q2 return. So we're happy with that. And the other higher score, the 8 there, the second from the bottom, that's something which we need to keep an eye on. That's very much dependent on government policy. We were expecting an announcement in the autumn, but I imagine with all the turmoil that will be pushed out a bit. So that's a bit of a watching brief for us. And the other scores there are staying nice and low where we like them to be. So we'll move on to the case studies. Lloyd, do you want to introduce this section?
Yes, so the biggest of the 2 capital delivery programs is the local growth deal, and that totals around 178 million. As I mentioned before, there is a small tail left on that, but rather than talk you through loads of finance figures on a detailed appendice, we thought it'd be more useful to talk through a few of the live schemes in the local growth fund and highlight the grant expenditure process, any issues, how they've been dealt with, and give you the latest status on the project. So we're going to be looking at the South Sea Coastal Defence Scheme, which is run by Portsmouth City Council, the North Whiteley Infrastructure Project, which is run by a consortium of private companies, and the Stampton Bypass, which is run by Hampshire County Council.
That's right. So South Sea Coastal first, and if Tristan's still on the call, Lloyd noticed that you've got a lovely picture of it in your background, which is great. Very, very on message. Thank you very much. So this is we gave a £5 million grant to this scheme from the local growth deal. In fact, all the examples are from the local growth deal as it happens. This is about delivering new sea defence along 4.5 kilometres of the seafront, which won't just affect that area. It's not just about prettying up. This is a very functional project to reduce flood risk for quite a wide band along the southern coast of Portsmouth. We have contracted with Portsmouth City Council to produce the outputs you see in the bullet points there, really focusing on the flood risk management jobs, both short-term sort of during the construction, but also longer term, and the housing and commercial floor space. And then GVA, that's cropped up again. Someone asked what that meant earlier, growth value added. So with a few of our schemes, we measure that growth value added over a longer term period as well. Lloyd.
The update on the scheme. So the work to the sub-frontage 1 part of the scheme is on track to complete by December 22. Works are well advanced, but the delivery period had to be extended due to delays to supply of materials, which have been because of various economic issues. And these impacts are being felt across all the construction projects that we're looking at. It's not just specific to this one. One specific issue that has been to this project, is the uncovering of the historic walls. So when this happens, they need to be preserved, protected, and then they need to be incorporated in the final design, and therefore causes delays in the delivery of the scheme. There's also been challenges with rising costs of materials, and we've seen increases of up to 10 to 15% in costs. Again, it's the same across all of our projects, and for this particular project, the main grant funder has been able to offer more grant funding to support the rising costs. With a number of challenges that have arisen, this project has featured a few times in the risk management to the board, but there's been very effective communication channels between us and PCC to help us understand and mitigate the risks. So there's been examples that PCC offers weekly and monthly updates. We have site visits, annual progress reviews, as Kate spoke about before, and all helps keep the LEP board informed. In terms of grant payments, there is a funding agreement between the LEP and PCC. There's a schedule for drawing down the grant, and this is based on the expenditure forecast for the scheme. This will sometimes vary to compensate for any delays in the project. And the grant recipient will need to submit a grant claim form, which is accompanied by any output evidence and project expenditure evidence. And to date, South Sea Coastal Scheme has claimed £3 million worth of local growth deal funding. The final claim has been delayed, and we won't pay that until the final works are completed in December. And if you want any more information on the South Sea Coastal Scheme, there is a web address at the bottom of that slide.
Yeah, we'll put that in the chat, but also these slides can be circulated after the meeting as well, so you can get that web address from there. The second example we wanted to look at quickly was North Whiteley, which is one of our largest grants that we've allocated at £14 million. Although this is going towards highways work for the big new development there, actually what we're buying with the grant is really the new homes and the jobs and the notes on those bullet points there that you can see. They do some really good drone footage of the development coming on at regular intervals. So after this meeting, please do have a click on that YouTube link and have a look at that. As well as all the normal reporting that we do that we've mentioned a few times, quarterly reports, annual progress reviews, and all the rest of it. We have fortnightly meetings with the team there. Sorry, Lloyd, I'm probably stepping on your toes. Over to you.
No, not at all. So the grant-funded element of the project is expected to complete in June 24 now. The housing building programme will continue beyond this to 2028. The reason the grant-funded element of the project is expected to complete in 2024 is delays due to the Phase 2 off-site roadworks. Access to the Phase 2 site has been restricted because it's currently being used by Hampshire County Council to carry out the smart motorway works nearby. Again, communication with the consortium through fortnightly meetings, as Kate's mentioned, has been absolutely key to keeping the board informed. And there's funding agreements between us and the consortium for drawing down the grant. To date, much of the grant relates to the Phase 1 part of the scheme, which has been completed and makes up £8.6 million worth of local growth funding. And then the majority of the remaining grant will be Phase 2 and Phase 3. And as part of the funding agreement, we hold back 15% of the grant amount until all works associated with all phases of the scheme are completed.
Yeah, that's a sort of standard element throughout all our grant funding agreements, actually, which is very helpful. We're going to race on to the final slide. You'll be pleased to know about Stampton Bypass. We've squished this all into one, but very similar information. So this is our largest grant that we've awarded at £34 million. It's primarily for the 3.5 kilometres of the brand new Stampton Bypass, as the name suggests, but it also includes highways improvement works to Stampton Village itself, which is what has just started this week actually, and should complete early in the new year. The bypass itself opened in May, and again there's another film that you can have a look at after the meeting if you're interested in that. It's quite short and to the point, so worth a click on over a cup of tea. Again, fortnightly meetings, which we found really useful, quite informal, just with the senior programme officer. Sometimes they last 5 minutes, sometimes they last half an hour, but a good chance for us to work through any issues as they've arisen. Lloyd.
Yeah, so the majority of the grant funding is related to the bypass works, which Kate's mentioned is completed now. So 97.5% of the grant has been paid. The final 2.5% of the grant will be held back until the village works complete, and that will be in March 23.
Brilliant. And we're done. Gosh, deep breath. We've raced through that. I will stop sharing my screen. But thank you very much for listening, and it was a real trot through, so apologies for that if we've just spoken non-stop. Are there any questions that anyone would like us to answer?
No hands have come up, but I mean, each of
Everyone's
the presentations has been sort of so full, they probably almost deserve a little meeting of their own, especially if they want a bit more scrutiny. But
well,
it's all...
I wonder if with the comments that you've just made there, Councillor McAvoy, I wonder if that's something that this group needs to think about. Actually, what do we want to concentrate on in future? There's been a bit of a gap since the last meeting in this one, so it's tried to cram a lot in.
Yes, it's whether you just want to do a presentation to us or whether you actually want some real scrutiny of it. And
I think the latter.
Then you probably need either a longer meeting, which I hate to say because I've got to go to another one in 10 minutes, but perhaps, you know, maybe an extra meeting or condensed so that we can concentrate on certain sections of it, because, you know, there's lots you could, I mean, I had several questions to ask in the first section, which I didn't ask because I was conscious of the time. And Darren obviously could have gone on, he could have spoken for England, I reckon. So, but it was interesting. It's not as if it was boring, it was interesting. So maybe that's worth thinking. I think Lauren would like to say something.
Yeah, I mean, hello everyone. Yeah, no, I think it's really important, the points that you've raised, and Councillor McAvoy, if we can catch up post meeting to think about what happens going forward, and if I can just invite all of the members to come back to me with any thoughts upon future topics that we might want to delve a little bit deeper into. I believe that all of the new members of the forum have left potentially. But if
we're
there's
talking to
anything,
ourselves, are we?
well, no, I mean, I think it's just in terms of the new members, if you know, if they want to delve deeper into something that they might not understand because we have discussed it in this forum previously, we might need to do some additional sessions, which we have done in the past, which might help. But obviously conscious of time, and just in terms of any other business, if all members can forward those ideas to myself or Councillor McAvoy, we can convene and look at what happens going forward for the Solent Growth Forum. Thank you.
So we haven't got, so all these people in my list here, are they members or are they officers?
They're members and officers, but I believe
right.
a number of people have left, obviously.
Right.
They've got other commitments.
So does anybody have any other business and any comments on what's just been said? Because I have to emphasise, I found it very interesting that loads and loads to take in. And if our job is really to scrutinise everything, you can only do that properly if you've got enough time. So
yeah, I think Laura and I will work on trying to get another meeting in sort of sooner than this one came since the last meeting, and like say, so try and concentrate on fewer things and give them more time.
Correct. Well, no, I've given everybody time to put their hands up. No little hands have come up. So thank you all for your presentations. Thank you all for attending. I hope you found it useful, and I hope that you'll be looking forward to the next meetings. So with that, I will sign off and go to my next meeting. So thank you all for coming. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.